WNBA Finals. And so I'll leave it there. I mean, I'm just obviously disheartened. You know, I'm a human too. I have a family. I have 2 kids who are devastated by these comments. And so all I'll say is just, you know, it's obviously
the screech of sneakers against hardwood, the deafening roar of a sold-out arena, the crisp swish of a logo three-pointer. These are the sounds of a revolution. But beneath the exhilarating surface of the WNBA's unprecedented boom in the mid-2020 seconds, another, more ominous sound could be heard, a low, persistent hum of discontent, a grinding tension threatening to tear the very fabric of the league apart at the seams. The epicenter of this seismic shift was a 22-year-old from West Des Moines, Iowa, named Caitlin Clark. Her arrival in the WNBA in 2024 wasn't a debut. It was a cultural detonation. She brought with her a tsunami of new fans, record-shattering television ratings, sold-out road arenas, and a marketing magnetism the league had never before witnessed. Her $28 million Nike endorsement deal, signed before she'd dribbled a single professional minute, wasn't just a contract. It was a declaration of a new economic order. It was supposed to be the triumphant culmination of decades of struggle, the moment women's basketball finally, irrevocably, crashed into the mainstream. But that signature on the dotted line, penned with such hope, didn't just secure generational wealth for one athlete. In the complex, emotionally charged ecosystem of the WNBA, it acted as a lightning rod, drawing down a storm of resentment, jealousy, and long-simmering grievances. The victory lap never materialized. Instead, Caitlin Clark found herself running a gauntlet. The Caitlin Clark effect was real, but its shadow side, the backlash, the hostility, the institutional cold shoulder, was proving to be just as powerful. The league was experiencing explosive growth, but it was growth laced with toxicity. The message from certain quarters of the establishment, subtle at first but growing louder, felt less like a welcome and more like a warning. You may be the future, but the past isn't ready to hand you the keys. To comprehend the intensity of the reaction to Caitlin Clark, one must first understand the ground upon which she walked. The WNBA in 2024 was not a blank slate. It was a storied institution with nearly 3 decades of history, etched not in gold but in grit. It was a league built by pioneers who played for love of the game because the financial rewards were often an afterthought. For the legends who carried the torch, players like Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, Sylvia Fowles, and Candace Parker, the professional journey was a global odyssey of sacrifice. A WNBA maximum salary, while having grown significantly thanks to fierce collective bargaining, still hovered around $250,000. To achieve financial security, to build the kind of wealth commensurate with their status as world-class athletes, they had to become basketball mercenaries. Their off-seasons weren't for rest and recovery. They were for transcontinental flights to Russia, Turkey, China, and across Europe. They played year-round in often isolated conditions, destroying their bodies on unforgiving courts, all to make ends meet. They fought for basic amenities, for better travel, for a sliver of the spotlight enjoyed by their male counterparts. Their legacy was one of relentless grind, of proving their worth in a world that was often indifferent. This created a powerful, insular culture, a sisterhood forged in struggle. Respect was earned through sweat and tenure, through surviving the overseas gauntlet and paying dues. The hierarchy was clear. Veterans who had endured held a certain moral and social authority. The league's identity was collective. The W on the front of the jersey was often emphasized as more important than the name on the back. It was a mindset born of necessity, a unifying principle for a league perpetually fighting for survival. Then came Caitlin Clark. Her trajectory was not of the grind, but of the meteor. She entered the league not as a supplicant, but as the most hyped prospect in women's basketball history. Her value instantly validated by a corporate giant to the tune of $28 million. For some veterans, this wasn't just a new player arriving. It was an alien economic model landing in their midst. It felt like a bypass of the established system. The question, often unspoken but palpably felt, hung in the air. Why her? Why now? After all we've done? The powder keg was primed. and the spark that lit it was a brilliantly crafted viral Nike commercial. The ad was a masterclass in myth-making. It showed Clark alone in a dimly lit gym, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of a basketball echoing like a heartbeat. Shots rained down from distances that defied convention. The narration was sparse, powerful. This is what it takes. The imagery was unmistakable. The solitary hero, the obsessive work ethic, the dawn of a new era. To the outside world, to the millions of new, casual fans Clark had attracted, the ad was inspirational. It fit the archetype they understood from countless male sports narratives. The chosen one, putting in the unseen work to achieve greatness. It sold shoes. It built brand loyalty. It was, from Nike's perspective, perfect. Inside the WNBA ecosystem, however, the ad landed with a thud. It wasn't seen as inspiration. It was interpreted as erasure. The "this is what it takes" tagline, framing Clark's relentless training as the singular key to success, felt like an insult to every veteran who had also put in countless solitary hours, but without the multi-million-dollar endorsement deals waiting at dawn. The ad's solitary focus, its omission of any context of the league, its teammates, or the history that made her platform possible, was read as a statement. The WNBA didn't matter until Caitlin Clark arrived. For players who had spent careers fighting for any scrap of mainstream attention, seeing a rookie anointed as the savior in a global campaign felt like their lifetime of labor was being rendered invisible. The commercial didn't crown a queen. In their eyes, it coronated an outsider, suggesting that their nearly 30-year struggle was merely a prelude to the main event. This sentiment of being overlooked in their own house was the emotional fuel that would soon ignite. The hostility did not emerge from a vacuum. Even before Clark was drafted, warning shots were fired from the highest parapets of the sport. The most iconic came from Diana Taurasi, the league's all-time leading scorer, a figure of immense respect and hardened competitiveness. During the NCAA Final Four, with Clark's record-breaking college career nearing its end, Taurasi was asked on ESPN about the phenom's professional prospects. Her response was delivered with a chilling, matter-of-fact coolness. Reality is coming. At the moment, some brushed it off as typical veteran bluntness, a reminder that the pro game is different. But in the context of what was to follow, the phrase took on a more ominous tone. It sounded less like advice and more like a prophecy or a threat. It set a narrative. The WNBA was not a welcoming committee. It was a fortress, and the drawbridge would not be lowered. Clark would have to storm the walls. This public framing from a legend gave implicit permission for a certain attitude to take hold. It signaled to the league's players that testing Clark, making her prove it, was not just acceptable, but expected. When the season began, this narrative manifested physically. Clark was met with a level of defensive intensity that was extraordinary for a rookie. She was picked up full court, hip-checked on cuts, hammered on drives, and subjected to a physical gauntlet that seemed to go beyond competitive spirit into the realm of initiation by fire. The basketball became personal. Every opponent guarding Clark wasn't just playing for a win, they were playing for their own brand, for the respect of the veterans, to prove that the $28 million girl was not untouchable. Stopping Clark became a badge of honor. The game within the game became about administering the reality Taurasi had promised. In this escalating environment, the role of league leadership was crucial. Historically, when a sport inherits a once-in-a-generation talent who is driving unprecedented economic growth, the institution moves to protect that asset. The NBA famously implemented the Jordan rules on officiating to protect Michael Bird from overly physical defenses. They managed the narratives around LeBron James. The calculus is simple. The superstar is the golden goose, and you safeguard the goose. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, a former corporate CEO tasked with stewarding the league's business, faced a profound test. She had to balance the explosive, Clark-driven growth with the delicate internal politics of a veteran-led league. Her response, however, would become a case study in misreading the moment and exacerbating the crisis. The critical failure occurred during a CNBC interview. As the toxic discourse around Clark, a maelstrom of race-baiting, vicious online harassment, and venom between fan bases reached a fever pitch, Engelbert was asked to address it. Instead of issuing a clear, unequivocal condemnation of the hate, instead of drawing a firm line to protect all her players, she chose a different rhetorical path. She smiled and compared the friction between Clark and rival Angel Reese to the legendary rivalry of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. She spoke of how such dynamics are good for business, how they drive ratings and conversation. On a superficial level, it was a comparison to a famous NBA revival story. But context is everything. Magic and Bird's rivalry, while fierce, was not conducted under the 24/7 microscope of social media, where fan wars spill over into doxing and death threats. By equating the current WNBA toxicity with a storied, largely on-court 1,980 seconds rivalry, Engelbert performed a dangerous minimization. She reframed very real issues of player safety and mental health as mere storylines and narratives beneficial to the bottom line. The message received was catastrophic. To Clark's camp and her millions of new fans, it sounded like the league commissioner was condoning the hostility, valuing the drama and the TV ratings over the well-being of a player being subjected to an unprecedented barrage. To the veterans, it may have sounded like validation that their physical reality check approach was sanctioned, as long as it generated headlines. It was a blunder of monumental proportions. The league's failure to unequivocally protect its most valuable asset sent a chilling signal. You are on your own. We will profit from your fame, but we will not shield you from the consequences of it. The Players Association, led by Terry Jackson, was forced to issue its own statement, essentially rebuking the commissioner's lack of leadership, an extraordinary act that highlighted the vacuum at the top. The institutional green light, perceived or real, translated directly into the chaos of the game. The physical play escalated beyond hard basketball fouls into moments that crossed the line into something else entirely. The most infamous example was the Kennedy Carter incident. The ball was dead. Caitlin Clark was standing still, waiting for an inbound pass. Chicago sky guard Carter, with a running start, delivered a blatant, blindside hip check that sent Clark sprawling to the floor. It was a non-basketball play, pure and simple. Carter then compounded it by reportedly hurling a profanity at Clark as she ran back down court. The league's response was telling. The referees on the spot called only a common foul. The league office was slow to react. It was only after the clip had gone viral, viewed millions of times, and sparked a massive public outcry that the foul was belatedly upgraded to a flagrant one. This hesitant, reactive discipline sent a deafening message to every player in the league. The bar for punishing aggression against Caitlin Clark is remarkably high. The hesitation whispered, "This is part of her dues. Let the process play out." Contrast this with other major sports. If a role player had taken a similar cheap shot at LeBron James or Stephen Curry, an immediate ejection and a multi-game suspension would have been virtually guaranteed. For Clark, it became just another "welcome to the W" talking point on sports debate shows. The message of open season was reinforced not by what the league did, but by what it failed to do quickly and decisively. The warning to Clark was also embedded within a narrative the league seemed all too happy to promote: the Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese rivalry. Reese, a phenomenal rebounder and fierce competitor from LSU, was positioned by media and fans as Clark's on-court nemesis, a dynamic dating back to their collegiate national championship game. The league, sensing the marketing potential, often seemed to lean into this good versus evil, hero versus villain framing. Engelbert's Magic and Bird comment explicitly endorsed it. When Reese was fined for refusing post-game media availability, or when she was seen on the bench passionately cheering as her teammate committed a hard foul on Clark, it was framed as part of the compelling drama. But this narrative machine had dangerous side effects. It incentivized conflict over competition. It encouraged players like Reese to lean into the bad girl role, understanding that defiance and intensity against Clark garnered attention. It told the entire league that friction with Clark was a path to relevance. Clark herself was trapped in this dynamic, used as the perpetual foil, the bait in a storyline that often overshadowed the actual basketball. The warning here was about her agency. Her story would be shaped and sold by the league for its benefit, often in ways that heightened the animosity around her. Beneath the on-court drama and the narrative warfare lay the stark, uncomfortable financial truth that fueled much of the underlying resentment. Caitlin Clark's economic impact was immediate and tangible. One of her most direct effects was the final, full implementation of league-wide charter flights for team travel, a long-sought player safety and performance benefit that had been deemed too costly for years. Clark's popularity and the security concerns surrounding her travel made the previous commercial flight model untenable. The league had to standardize charters to avoid the terrible optics of the Indiana Fever flying privately, while other teams flew commercial, almost overnight. Because of the pressure created by a single rookie's presence, every player in the WNBA gained a significant quality of life improvement. This created a bizarre and psychologically fraught reality. Veteran players, after a decade of cramped commercial travel, were now enjoying charter flights, better sleep, and faster recovery, courtesy of the very rookie they were trying to humble on the court. The cognitive dissonance was intense. How do you reconcile trying to prove someone isn't special while simultaneously benefiting from the special treatment their presence demanded? This dynamic bred a deep, complex jealousy. It wasn't just about the $28 million Nike deal. It was about the visceral, daily reminder that her mere existence had changed their working conditions. The gratitude for the improvement was tangled with resentment toward its source. The warnings to Clark were amplified and given intellectual cover by voices from the league's past. Cheryl Swoopes, a three-time MVP and a foundational legend, appeared on a podcast and made a series of factually incorrect statements about Clark's college career. She claimed Clark had played 5 years to break records. She played 4. She exaggerated her shot attempts, while some argued it was mere sloppiness. The effect was a deliberate or accidental diminishment of Clark's accomplishments. When a figure of Swoopes' stature publicly downplays the achievements of the incoming star, it creates a powerful permission structure. It signals to the broader basketball community, fans, media, other players that skepticism and dismissal of Clark's hype are not only acceptable, but are the intellectually honest position of those who know the game. The league's failure to publicly correct such factual inaccuracies, however subtle, allowed this narrative of illegitimacy to fester. This was part of a broader media tour in the preseason, where various veterans and analysts framed Clark's popularity through the lens of white privilege and the Great White Hope Syndrome. While these are critical, valid discussions about racial dynamics in sports media coverage, their weaponization against a two-year-old athlete became a form of psychological warfare. It placed an immense, unfair burden on Clark, making every game and every statistic a political referendum. The basketball itself was buried under an avalanche of socio-cultural analysis, much of it hostile. The most formal, institutional warning came from the selection committee for the 2024 Paris Olympics. In a decision that stunned the sports world, Caitlin Clark, the most talked about, most popular, and statistically phenomenal rookie, was left off the Team USA roster. The official reasons were couched in the language of experience, chemistry, and fit. The committee, deeply intertwined with the WNBA and USA basketball establishment, chose the veteran core that had long dominated international play. On paper, it was a defensible basketball decision, but in context, it felt profoundly symbolic. The Olympic snub was the old guard's most powerful rebuke. It was a statement that read, "Our club, our tradition, our hierarchy still decides who represents the country. Your popularity and your Nike deal don't grant you immediate access to this sacred circle. You haven't paid the dues." It was an attempt to put Clark in her place, to remind her and the world that there were gates she couldn't crash. The move backfired spectacularly. Instead of quieting the Clark phenomenon, it magnified it. The conversation around the U.S. women's basketball team became dominated by one question: where's Caitlin Clark? Her absence became the story, overshadowing the team's quest for gold. The committee, in trying to uphold the old order, only proved the new reality. Clark's presence or absence was the defining narrative. The snub didn't humble her. It highlighted the disconnect between the institution and the public's passionate interest. By the middle of the 2025 season, the WNBA found itself sitting on a powder keg of its own making. The product on the court was more visible than ever, but it was a product that often looked inhospitable to its new consumers. The millions of casual fans who tuned in to see Caitlin Clark play were frequently met with a spectacle of overt physicality, questionable officiating, and a palpable sense of hostility. The comment sections on social media transformed into war zones, not debating X's and O's, but trading accusations of jealousy, racism, and hate. The question from this new fan base was persistent and damning. Why does this league seem to hate its own savior? This was the central danger of the warning campaign. In its effort to manage internal culture and humble a superstar, the league risked alienating the very audience it had spent 30 years trying to attract. The toxic atmosphere threatened to be unsustainable. If the casual fans drawn by Clark's brilliance concluded that the WNBA was a hostile environment rigged against its brightest star, they would leave. And if they left, the soaring television ratings would fall. The momentum for a historic new TV deal would stall. And the charter flights, the tangible symbol of progress, could be grounded. Commissioner Engelbert and the league office faced an existential dilemma. They needed to pivot from sending warnings to extending protection. They needed to recognize that Caitlin Clark was not just a player, but an economy, an economic engine that was funding the league's long-awaited growth. The toxic cloud wasn't good for business. It was a threat to the entire enterprise. The warnings needed to stop, not for Clark's sake alone, but for the sake of every player whose newfound financial stability depended on the continued growth she was driving. The revolution in women's basketball was televised, but it was also brutal, messy, and emotionally charged. It was a clash between the culture of the grind and the force of the meteor, between collective identity and individual superstardom, between the past's hard-earned respect and the future's market-driven reality. The warnings sent to Caitlin Clark were the dying echoes of an old world trying to assert its relevance. Whether the league could silence those echoes and fully embrace the transformative, if tumultuous, future she represented would determine if the WNBA's breakout moment would be remembered as a new beginning or a tragic, self-inflicted fracture. The ball, as always, was in their court.